Captain Sarah Mitchell stood at attention in the briefing room, her flight suit crisp and her expression steady despite the weight of dozens of eyes upon her. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Fort Bragg's aviation facility, casting long shadows across the assembled officers. At the head of the room, General Robert Hawkins reviewed a stack of personnel files, his weathered face showing the skepticism that had become his trademark over 30 years of military service. The general had arrived at the base the previous week for an inspection tour that would determine the future of several aviation programs. His reputation preceded him, a man who believed in tradition, experience, and what he called proven methods. At 58, he had commanded helicopter units in 3 different conflicts and held firm opinions about who belonged in a cockpit during combat operations. Sarah had been selected to demonstrate the capabilities of the new Apache helicopter program, a choice that had already sparked conversations throughout the base. At 29, she was one of only 12 female Apache pilots in the entire military, having fought her way through every stage of training with determination that impressed even her harshest critics. Her record spoke volumes: top of her class at flight school, flawless performance reviews, and over 800 hours of flight time in various aircraft. The briefing room buzzed with quiet conversations as officers discussed the day's agenda. Sarah caught fragments of whispered remarks, some supportive, others doubtful. She had grown accustomed to being the subject of such discussions, but today felt different. Today, her performance would influence not just her own career, but the future opportunities for other women in combat aviation. General Hawkins cleared his throat, bringing the room to silence. His gray eyes swept across the assembled personnel before settling on Sarah. "Captain Mitchell," he began, his voice carrying the authority of decades of command, "I understand you're going to show us what this Apache can do today." There was something in his tone that suggested he had already formed his conclusions. "Yes, sir," Sarah replied, her voice clear and confident. "We've prepared a comprehensive demonstration that showcases the aircraft's capabilities in various combat scenarios." The general leaned back in his chair, a slight smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "Tell me, Captain, how long have you been flying these birds?" The question seemed innocent enough, but Sarah sensed the undercurrent of doubt. 2 years, sir. I completed Apache training at Fort Rucker and have been operational here for 18 months. Sarah maintained her professional demeanor, though she could feel the tension building in the room. 2 years, the general repeated, making a note on his pad. "And before that?" "I flew Blackhawks for 3 years, sir. Transport and medical evacuation missions primarily." Sarah's background was solid, and she knew it. Every pilot in the room understood the skill required for medical evacuations, especially under combat conditions. General Hawkins nodded slowly, then looked around the room at the other pilots. "Gentlemen, how many of you have been flying Apaches for more than 5 years?" Several hands went up, and the general's expression grew more pronounced. "And how many have combat experience in these aircraft?" Fewer hands remained raised, but the implication was clear. The general stood up, walking around to the front of his desk. "Captain Mitchell, I'm sure you understand that the Apache is not like other helicopters. It's a weapon system that requires split-second decisions, aggressive maneuvering, and the ability to engage multiple targets while under fire. The pilot doesn't just fly the aircraft, they become part of it." His words carried the weight of experience, but also something else that made Sarah's jaw tighten slightly. "I understand completely, sir," Sarah responded. "The Apache is indeed a complex weapons platform, and I've trained extensively in all aspects of its operation." The general's smirk became more visible. "Training is one thing, Captain, but when the shooting starts, when you're taking fire and need to put steel on target while maneuvering through hostile territory, that's when you find out what someone is really made of." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Some people just aren't built for that kind of pressure." The room grew uncomfortably quiet. Sarah felt her cheeks warm slightly, but her voice remained steady. With respect, sir, I believe my performance record demonstrates my ability to handle pressure. My instructors and commanding officers have consistently rated my combat readiness as exemplary. Paper evaluations. The general dismissed with a wave of his hand. Anyone can look good on paper, Captain. But when you're flying 150 miles per hour at 50 feet, with enemy fire coming from 3 directions, and you need to take out a target that's threatening ground troops, that's when you discover whether someone has what it takes or whether they should be flying supply runs instead. The words stung, but Sarah had heard variations of them before. She had faced this kind of skepticism throughout her career, from flight school instructors who questioned her physical strength to fellow pilots who doubted her killer instinct. Each time she had responded the same way, through performance, not words. Colonel James Reed, the base aviation commander, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He had worked with Sarah for over a year and knew her capabilities intimately. General, Captain Mitchell has consistently exceeded performance standards in all her evaluations. She's actually requested additional combat training rotations. General Hawkins glanced at Colonel Reed, then back at Sarah. Requested additional training? Well, that's commendable, Captain. But requesting something and excelling at it are 2 different things entirely. He walked closer to Sarah, his voice taking on what some might have mistaken for a fatherly tone, but which Sarah recognized as condescension. You know, Captain, I've been flying helicopters since before you were born. I've seen a lot of good pilots, and I've seen a lot of people who thought they were good pilots. The Apache is the most sophisticated attack helicopter in the world, and flying it in combat is not a job for everyone. He paused, studying her face for any sign of doubt. Some people are just better suited for certain roles. The implication hung in the air like smoke from a crashed aircraft. Sarah felt the eyes of every person in the room upon her, waiting to see how she would respond to what was clearly a challenge to her competence based not on her record, but on her gender. General, Sarah said, her voice carrying a new edge of steel. I appreciate your concern for my welfare and that of my fellow service members. However, I'm confident that my training, experience, and dedication to excellence prepare me for whatever challenges I might face in the cockpit. The general chuckled, a sound that grated against Sarah's nerves. Confidence is good, Captain, but overconfidence can get people killed. I've seen too many young pilots who thought they could handle anything, only to find out they were wrong when it mattered most. Major Danny Crawford, Sarah's co-pilot and weapons officer, spoke up for the first time. Sir, if I may, I've flown over 200 hours with Captain Mitchell, including combat simulation exercises. Her situational awareness and tactical decision-making are exceptional. I would trust her in any combat situation. General Hawkins turned his attention to Major Crawford, sizing him up with the same critical eye. Major, I appreciate your loyalty to your pilot. That's commendable. But loyalty shouldn't cloud professional judgment. Sometimes we need to be honest about limitations even when it's uncomfortable. The general returned to his position behind the desk, picking up Sarah's file once more. Captain Mitchell, I'm looking at your record here, and while it's certainly adequate, I notice you've never been in actual combat. All your experience is in training exercises and simulations. That's quite different from the real thing. That's correct, sir, Sarah acknowledged. However, the same could be said for most pilots currently flying Apaches, given that we've been in a period of relative peace in terms of helicopter combat operations. True enough, the general conceded, but experience in other aircraft during actual combat operations provides insights that no amount of simulation can replicate. Have you ever been shot at, Captain? Sarah hesitated for just a moment. Not while flying an attack helicopter, sir. During my Black Hawk service, I flew medical evacuation missions in hostile areas, but direct engagement wasn't part of our mission profile. Medical evacuation, the general repeated thoughtfully. Noble work, certainly. Flying wounded soldiers to safety requires skill and courage. But it's quite different from actively hunting enemy targets while they're shooting back at you. The general closed Sarah's file and looked directly at her. Captain, I'm going to be frank with you. I've been asked to evaluate this program and make recommendations about its future. Part of that evaluation involves determining whether our pilots can handle the demands of modern combat operations. Today's demonstration is more than just a show and tell. It's a test of combat readiness. He stood up again, his posture conveying the authority of his rank and experience. Now, I'm not saying you can't fly the aircraft. I'm sure you can make it go up, down, and sideways just fine. But when I was your age, I was already flying Cobras in Vietnam, learning what real combat was like. That experience taught me things no training program ever could. The general's tone became almost conversational, but with an edge that everyone in the room could feel. You know what I learned in Vietnam, Captain? I learned that when the pressure is really on, when lives are hanging in the balance, some people freeze up. Others make mistakes they would never make in training. And sometimes, people who look great on paper just can't pull the trigger when it counts. Sarah felt her anger rising but kept her expression neutral. Sir, I understand your concerns about combat readiness. However, I believe that thorough training, proper preparation, and mental conditioning can prepare a pilot for combat situations, regardless of their previous experience level. Mental conditioning, the general repeated with another chuckle. That's a nice phrase, Captain. Very modern. But when an RPG is screaming toward your aircraft, or when you're taking small arms fire from multiple positions while trying to protect friendly forces on the ground, all that mental conditioning becomes secondary to instinct and experience. He moved to the window, looking out at the flight line where several Apache helicopters sat ready for the day's demonstration. Those machines represent millions of dollars in taxpayer investment, not to mention the lives of the crews who fly them and the soldiers they're meant to protect. I take the responsibility of evaluating their operational readiness very seriously. Turning back to face the room, the general's expression grew more serious. Captain Mitchell, I want you to understand that my questions aren't personal, they're professional. I've seen what happens when pilots are put into situations they're not ready for, and the results are usually tragic. If I have doubts about someone's readiness, I'm going to voice those doubts. I appreciate your dedication to safety, sir, Sarah replied. However, I would respectfully suggest that readiness should be evaluated based on demonstrated performance rather than assumptions about limitations. The general's eyebrows rose slightly. Assumptions? Captain, I'm basing my concerns on 30 years of experience in military aviation. I've seen patterns, trends, and outcomes that younger officers might not recognize. Sometimes experience trumps optimism. Colonel Reed cleared his throat again. General, perhaps we should proceed with the demonstration. Captain Mitchell's performance will speak for itself. Indeed it will, the general agreed, but his tone suggested he had already reached his conclusions. Captain, I'm going to be honest with you. When I was told that today's primary demonstration pilot would be a female officer with limited Apache experience, I had concerns. Those concerns haven't been alleviated by our conversation. Sarah felt the weight of representation settling on her shoulders. She wasn't just flying for herself today. She was flying for every woman who wanted to serve in combat aviation, for every person who had been underestimated because of their gender, race, or background. Sir, Sarah said, her voice carrying new resolve, I respectfully request the opportunity to address your concerns through demonstration rather than discussion. Actions speak louder than words, and I believe my performance today will provide a more accurate assessment of my capabilities than any conversation could. General Hawkins smiled, but it wasn't a friendly expression. Very well, Captain. You'll have your opportunity to prove yourself. But understand this. I'll be evaluating every aspect of your performance with the same standards I would apply to any pilot, regardless of gender. If you can't meet those standards, I'll recommend appropriate reassignment. The threat was clear, and Sarah nodded her acknowledgement. I wouldn't expect anything less, sir. I'm ready to be evaluated by the highest standards. Good, the general said. Then let's head out to the flight line. I'm particularly interested in seeing how you handle the weapon systems under stress. We've arranged some challenging scenarios that should test your limits. His smile grew wider. Don't worry, Captain. I'm sure you'll do your best. As the briefing broke up and officers began filing out toward the aircraft, Sarah felt the mixture of determination and nervous energy that always preceded a significant flight. But this time was different. This time, she wasn't just proving herself. She was proving that talent and dedication mattered more than prejudice and assumption. The general had made his position clear through his questions and comments. He doubted her ability to handle the Apache in combat situations, questioned her readiness, and seemed to have already decided that she was unsuitable for the role. But Sarah had faced skeptics before, and she had always found the same solution: let her flying do the talking. Walking toward the flight line, Sarah could hear the general continuing his conversation with other officers, his voice carrying clearly in the morning air. I hope I'm wrong about this, he was saying, but I've learned to trust my instincts about pilots. Some people just aren't cut out for this kind of work, no matter how much they want it or how hard they try. Sarah's jaw tightened, but her stride never faltered. Today, she would show General Hawkins exactly what she was cut out for. The Apache helicopter sat on the tarmac like a sleeping predator, its angular lines and weapon systems giving it an unmistakably lethal appearance. Sarah conducted her pre-flight inspection with methodical precision, checking every system twice while General Hawkins and his entourage observed from a distance. She could feel their eyes on her, analyzing every movement, every procedure, waiting for any sign of uncertainty or hesitation. Major Crawford joined her at the aircraft, his expression mixing confidence with concern. "Sarah," he said quietly, "that was quite a setup in there. The general's already made up his mind about you." "Then we'll have to change it," Sarah replied, running her hand along the helicopter's fuselage. "This bird and I understand each other. Today we're going to show them what we can do." The Apache AH-64 was indeed a formidable machine. With its twin engines, sophisticated targeting systems, and array of weapons including Hellfire missiles and a 30mm cannon, it represented the pinnacle of attack helicopter technology. Sarah knew every inch of its systems, every nuance of its flight characteristics, and every capability of its weapons platforms. General Hawkins approached with Colonel Reed and several other officers. "Captain Mitchell," the general called out, "I've modified today's exercise slightly. We're going to put you through some scenarios that will test your adaptability and decision-making under pressure." Sarah looked up from her checklist. "What kind of modifications, sir?" "Well," the general said with that same condescending smile, "instead of the standard demonstration profile, we're going to simulate some real-world situations. Unexpected target changes, equipment malfunctions, time-sensitive missions, the kind of things that separate good pilots from great ones." Colonel Reed frowned. "General, those modifications weren't in the briefing. Captain Mitchell has prepared for a specific demonstration profile." "Colonel," the general replied, his tone carrying just enough edge to remind everyone of his rank, "real combat doesn't follow briefing profiles. A truly competent pilot should be able to adapt to changing situations, unless you think Captain Mitchell isn't capable of handling unexpected challenges." The trap was obvious, but Sarah stepped forward before Colonel Reed could respond. "Sir, I'm ready for whatever scenarios you'd like to present. An Apache pilot needs to be prepared for anything." "Excellent attitude, Captain," the general said. "I'm glad to see you're confident in your abilities." He turned to one of his aides. "Major Harrison, brief Captain Mitchell on the new parameters." Major Harrison, a stern-faced officer who had remained silent during the briefing, stepped forward with a tablet. "Captain, You'll be given target coordinates once airborne. Your mission will involve multiple objectives with varying priority levels. Some targets will be stationary, others mobile. You'll have limited ammunition, so target selection and engagement efficiency will be critical. Sarah nodded, absorbing the information. Understood. What about rules of engagement? Standard ROE applies, but you'll be given friendly force positions that must be protected. Any engagement that risks friendly casualties will result in mission failure. Major Harrison's tone was clinical, but Sarah detected an undertone that suggested he wasn't entirely comfortable with the general's modifications. Additionally, the general interjected, we'll be introducing some mechanical challenges during the flight. Nothing dangerous, mind you, but systems that might malfunction at inopportune moments. We need to see how you respond when things don't go according to plan. Sarah felt her pulse quicken, but not from nervousness, from anticipation. These weren't standard training scenarios. They were designed to make her fail. The general was stacking the deck against her, probably hoping to justify his preconceptions. But Sarah had trained for exactly these kinds of situations, and she welcomed the challenge. One more thing, the general added almost as an afterthought. I'll be monitoring your performance from the command post. Along with my evaluation team, we'll be recording everything: flight data, weapon accuracy, communication protocols, decision timing. This will be a comprehensive assessment. Sarah climbed into the Apache's front seat, with Major Crawford settling into the rear pilot position. The cockpit was cramped but familiar, every switch and display positioned exactly where her muscle memory expected it to be. She began the startup sequence, the twin engines winding up with their characteristic whine. All systems green, Crawford reported through the intercom. Weapon systems armed and ready. Target acquisition system online. Roger that, Sarah responded, her voice taking on the calm professionalism that came automatically in the cockpit. Fort Bragg Tower, this is Apache 01, requesting clearance for tactical demonstration flight. Apache 01, cleared for takeoff. Contact range control on 142.5 when airborne. Sarah pulled pitch, and the Apache lifted smoothly from the tarmac. The sensation of flight always filled her with a sense of freedom and purpose, but today carried extra weight. Through the cockpit glass, she could see General Hawkins watching from the observation area, his arms crossed and his expression skeptical. Range control. Apache 01 airborne requesting first objective. Apache 01, proceed to grid coordinates 345678. You have multiple targets in the area. Exercise is live. Begin when ready. Sarah banked the Apache toward the designated coordinates, the aircraft responding to her touch like an extension of her own body. The first target area was a simulated enemy compound with several buildings and vehicles. According to her brief, some contained hostile forces while others might house civilians or friendly personnel. "Danny, what's our target picture?" she asked Crawford. "I've got multiple heat signatures in buildings Alpha and Charlie. Building Bravo appears empty. Vehicle convoy approaching from the east. Can't determine hostile or friendly yet." Sarah analyzed the situation quickly. The approaching convoy could be reinforcements for either side, and engaging too quickly could result in friendly fire. But waiting too long might allow hostiles to escape or reposition. Apache 01, be advised, convoy approaching your position has been identified as hostile. Engage immediately. The radio crackled with urgency, but something felt wrong to Sarah. The convoy was moving in formation consistent with friendly forces, and their approach angle didn't suggest an attack posture. Range control, requesting confirmation on convoy identification. Their movement pattern suggests friendly forces. Apache 01, you have positive identification hostile. Engage immediately or abort mission. Sarah felt the pressure of the moment. The general was undoubtedly watching, waiting for her to either make a mistake or show hesitation. But her training had taught her to trust her instincts, especially when something didn't feel right. Crawford, what's your assessment of that convoy? You're right, Sarah. They're not moving like hostiles. Speed, formation, approach angle, all wrong for an attack. Sarah made her decision. Range control? Apache 01 declining to engage convoy at this time. Request further verification of target identification. The radio fell silent for several long seconds. Then, Apache 01, convoy has been confirmed friendly. Good catch. Proceed with building targets. Sarah felt a wave of relief mixed with vindication. The general had tried to trap her into making a friendly fire error, but her training and instincts had prevailed. Now for the real targets. She maneuvered the Apache into attack position, using the aircraft's agility to approach from an unexpected angle. The buildings were arranged to provide mutual cover, requiring precise timing and positioning to engage effectively. Target acquired! Building Alpha, Crawford reported. Multiple heat signatures confirmed hostile. Hellfire engaged, Sarah announced, and the missile streaked toward its target with deadly accuracy. The building erupted in simulated destruction, all heat signatures eliminated. Engaging Building Charlie, she continued, bringing the Apache around in a tight turn that would have been impossible in a less agile aircraft. Another Hellfire found its mark perfectly. Apache 01, new taskings. Enemy armor approaching from the south. 2 tanks, hostile. Sarah's head turned toward the new threat vector. Tank hunting was one of the most dangerous missions for an attack helicopter, requiring split-second timing and perfect execution. Tanks could shoot back, and their armor required precise targeting to achieve kills. "I've got them!" Crawford called out. "Range 2,000 meters and closing. They don't appear to have acquired us yet." Sarah positioned the Apache for the engagement, using terrain features to mask their approach. The key was to engage from maximum range before the tanks could respond effectively. "Designating Target 1, Crawford announced. "Ready for engagement. Hellfire away." The first missile tracked perfectly, striking the lead tank center mass. "Target destroyed. Engaging Tank 2. The second tank was now aware of their presence and was turning its main gun toward them. Sarah had perhaps 10 seconds before it could acquire and fire. "He's tracking us," Crawford warned. Sarah threw the Apache into an aggressive defensive maneuver, dropping behind a ridgeline just as the tank's main gun fired where they had been moments before. She immediately popped back up in a different position, giving Crawford a clear shot at the tank's vulnerable rear armor. "Target acquired. Hellfire away." The second tank erupted in simulated destruction. "Apache 01, excellent work. Stand by for final scenario." Sarah was feeling confident now. The aircraft was performing flawlessly, her targeting was precise, and her tactical decisions had been correct. But she knew the general would save his biggest challenge for last. "Apache 01, emergency tasking. Friendly forces under attack at grid 456789. Multiple hostiles in urban environment. Friendly casualties reported. Immediate assistance required." Urban combat was the most challenging scenario for attack helicopters. Buildings provided cover for enemies while limiting engagement angles. Friendly forces on the ground made every shot critical. There was no room for error. Sarah pushed the Apache to maximum speed toward the new coordinates. "Crawford, start analyzing the target area. I need to know exactly where our people are before we start shooting." "Copy that. I'm picking up friendly IR markers, but they're scattered throughout the area. Hostiles are using buildings for cover and concealment." As they approached the simulated urban battlefield, Sarah could see it had been designed to be nearly impossible. Friendly forces were pinned down in multiple locations, with hostile forces positioned in buildings that provided excellent cover while threatening the friendlies below. "Apache 01, friendly commander reports urgent need for close air support. Multiple casualties, running low on ammunition." The pressure was mounting, but Sarah forced herself to remain calm and analytical. Rushing in would likely result in friendly casualties or mission failure. "Danny, give me a target priority list. Who's the biggest threat to our people on the ground?" Building at 2 o'clock has sniper positions covering the main street. Building at 11 o'clock has a machine gun nest pinning down Alpha Team. And there's a group of hostiles in the courtyard moving toward Bravo Team's position. Sarah positioned the Apache for the first engagement, using the aircraft's agility to approach from an angle that minimized risk to friendly forces. The sniper position required precision. Too much firepower might damage surrounding buildings where friendlies were located. "Engaging sniper position with 30mm cannon," she announced, and sent a controlled burst into the target building. The simulated hostile signatures disappeared immediately. Without pause, she repositioned for the machine gun nest. This target was trickier because of its proximity to friendly forces, but the Apache's sophisticated targeting system allowed for surgical precision. "Machine gun nest neutralized," Crawford reported, as another burst found its mark exactly where intended. The courtyard targets were mobile and required immediate attention. Sarah brought the Apache into a hover that would have been suicidal in real combat, but was necessary to protect the friendly forces below. "Engaging courtyard hostiles," she called out, using the cannon's precise targeting to eliminate the threats without endangering nearby buildings or friendly positions. Suddenly, warning alarms filled the cockpit. "Sarah, we've lost hydraulic pressure in the primary system," Crawford announced. "That's one of the General's planned malfunctions." Flying an Apache with degraded hydraulics was exponentially more difficult. The flight controls became heavy and less responsive, requiring constant attention and much greater physical effort. Lesser pilots had been known to lose control under such circumstances. "Apache 01, additional hostile forces approaching from the west. You are the only asset available to engage." Sarah gritted her teeth, fighting the now sluggish controls while maintaining position over the friendly forces. The new hostile group was moving toward an exposed friendly position, but engaging them would require maneuvering the damaged aircraft into a more vulnerable position. "Crawford, can you get me targeting data on those Western contacts while I deal with these controls?" "Working on it. They're using smoke for concealment, but I'm picking up movement signatures." Sarah managed to turn the Apache toward the new threat, despite the hydraulic problems. The aircraft felt like it was fighting her every input, but years of training had prepared her for exactly this situation. "I've got targets," Crawford announced. "Recommend Hellfire engagement due to range and concealment." "Agreed. Hellfire away." The missile tracked through the smoke and found its targets. But Sarah's problems weren't over. More warning lights appeared on the instrument panel. "Now we've lost the backup hydraulic system," Crawford reported. "We're flying on manual reversion only." Manual reversion meant the Apache had essentially become a conventional helicopter with extremely heavy controls and limited maneuverability. Most pilots would have declared an emergency and returned to base immediately. "Apache 01, final wave of hostiles approaching friendly positions from multiple directions. This is their last push. If we can stop them, the exercise is complete." Sarah looked at her instrument panel, then at the tactical display showing multiple hostile groups converging on friendly forces. In a real combat situation, she would have had to choose between mission completion and aircraft safety. "Crawford, can we engage multiple targets with degraded flight controls?" "It won't be easy, but the weapons systems are still functional. Your call?" "Sarah." Sarah made her decision instantly. "We're staying. Let's finish this." What followed was perhaps the most challenging 5 minutes of flying in Sarah's career. Fighting heavy, unresponsive controls while simultaneously engaging multiple targets required every ounce of skill and concentration she possessed. She had to anticipate every movement, compensate for delayed responses, and maintain precise positioning while Crawford designated and engaged targets. "Hostile Group Alpha eliminated," Crawford reported as another Hellfire found its mark. Sarah wrestled the aircraft into position for the next engagement, sweat beading on her forehead from the physical effort required. "Engaging Group Bravo with cannon." The 30-millimeter cannon found its targets despite the aircraft's instability. Sarah immediately began maneuvering toward the final hostile group, but the Apache was becoming increasingly difficult to control. "Last group coming up on your right," Crawford announced. Sarah turned the aircraft, fighting controls that seemed determined to do anything but what she commanded. The final hostile group was in a position that required precise maneuvering to engage without risking friendly forces. "Final engagement, hellfire away," Crawford called out. The missile streaked toward its target and impacted perfectly. Suddenly, the radio crackled with a different voice. "Apache 01, this is range control. Exercise complete. All objectives achieved. No friendly casualties, no mission failures. Return to base for debrief." Sarah felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her as the adrenaline began to fade. She had successfully completed every aspect of the modified mission despite the mechanical challenges and compressed timeline. "Outstanding work, Sarah," Crawford said over the intercom. "That was some of the best flying I've ever seen." As they flew back toward Fort Bragg, Sarah wondered what General Hawkins was thinking. She had met every challenge he had thrown at her, adapted to unexpected modifications, and completed the mission despite mechanical failures that would have grounded lesser pilots. But she also knew that some people's minds were already made up, regardless of evidence to the contrary. The general had made his skepticism clear from the beginning, and she wondered if even a perfect performance would be enough to change his opinion. "Apache 01, contact tower for landing clearance." Fort Bragg Tower. "Apache 01 requesting clearance to land." "Apache 01 cleared to land. Welcome back." As the Apache settled onto the tarmac, Sarah saw General Hawkins waiting with his evaluation team. His expression was unreadable, but something in his posture had changed. Whether that change was positive or negative, she would find out very soon. She shut down the engines and began the post-flight checklist, knowing that the most important part of the day was yet to come. The flying was over, but the real test was about to begin. Sarah climbed down from the Apache's cockpit, her flight suit damp with perspiration from the physical demands of flying with degraded hydraulic systems. The afternoon sun felt harsh against her face as she removed her helmet, but she maintained her composure despite the exhaustion coursing through her body. General Hawkins stood 30 feet away with his evaluation team, their expressions unreadable as they reviewed data on their tablets and clipboards. Colonel Reed approached first, his face breaking into a broad smile. "Captain Mitchell, that was exceptional flying. The way you handled those hydraulic failures while maintaining mission effectiveness was textbook perfect." His voice carried genuine admiration, but Sarah's attention remained focused on the general, who had not yet moved from his position. Major Crawford joined her on the tarmac, shaking his head in amazement. "Sarah, I've flown with some outstanding pilots, but what you just did in there was something else entirely. When those hydraulics went out, I thought we'd have to abort, but you kept us in the fight and completed every objective." Sarah appreciated the support, but she could feel the weight of the general's evaluation hanging over everything. She had flown her heart out, pushed herself and the aircraft to their limits, and proven her capabilities under the most challenging circumstances. But she had learned long ago that performance didn't always translate to acceptance. General Hawkins finally began walking toward them, his pace deliberate and his expression still giving nothing away. The evaluation team followed behind him, their own faces showing a mixture of surprise and something that might have been respect. Sarah straightened her posture and prepared for whatever was about to come. "Captain Mitchell," the general began, stopping directly in front of her. His gray eyes studied her face intently, and Sarah noticed that the condescending smirk from earlier had completely disappeared. "That was quite a demonstration." "Thank you, sir," Sarah replied, maintaining her professional demeanor. "The aircraft performed excellently, and Major Crawford provided outstanding support throughout the mission." The general nodded slowly. but his gaze never left Sarah's face. "The aircraft performed excellently," he repeated thoughtfully. "But what I observed today wasn't about the aircraft's performance, Captain. It was about the pilot's performance." Sarah felt her pulse quicken, but she kept her voice steady. "Sir?" General Hawkins turned to Major Harrison, his aide who had briefed the modified scenarios. "Major, what were the final numbers?" Major Harrison consulted his tablet, though Sarah suspected he already knew the figures by heart. "Sir, Captain Mitchell achieved a perfect mission completion rate. All primary and secondary objectives met, 0 friendly casualties, 0 mission failures. Weapon accuracy was 96%, well above standard. Flight time to completion was 14 minutes under the allocated window despite the mechanical challenges." The general's eyebrows rose slightly. 14 minutes under window, with hydraulic failures? "Yes, sir. Captain Mitchell maintained operational effectiveness throughout the degraded systems scenario. Most importantly, she made the correct decision regarding the convoy identification, avoiding what would have been a significant friendly fire incident." Sarah remembered the moment when she had refused to engage the convoy that had been misidentified as hostile. It had felt like a trap at the time, and apparently it had been exactly that, a test of her judgment under pressure. General Hawkins walked over to Colonel Reed, who had been standing quietly nearby. "Colonel, is this typical performance for Captain Mitchell?" "Sir, this is actually consistent with her usual standards. Captain Mitchell has consistently exceeded performance benchmarks since joining our unit. Today's demonstration was exceptional, but not out of character for her capabilities." The general returned his attention to Sarah, and for the first time, she saw something approaching uncertainty in his expression. "Captain, I'll be honest with you. When I arrived here last week and learned that a female officer with limited Apache experience would be conducting the primary demonstration, I had significant concerns." Sarah felt her jaw tighten slightly, but she remained silent, sensing that the general had more to say. "Those concerns were based on 30 years of experience in military aviation," he continued. "I've seen patterns, trends, and outcomes that shaped my expectations. I believed I could predict how today would unfold based on those preconceptions." The general paused, looking out toward the flight line where the Apache sat cooling down from its mission. "Captain Mitchell, what you demonstrated today challenged every assumption I brought with me to this base." Sarah blinked, uncertain whether she had heard correctly. The general's tone had completely changed from the condescending skepticism of the morning briefing. "Sir," she managed to say. General Hawkins faced her directly, his posture no longer suggesting superiority, but rather something approaching respect. "When those hydraulic systems failed, and yes, we triggered those failures deliberately to test your response. I expected you to abort the mission. Standard procedure would have been to declare an emergency and return to base immediately." He gestured toward the Apache. "Instead, you assessed the situation, determined that you could continue the mission safely, and proceeded to engage multiple target sets with degraded flight controls. That decision required not just technical skill, but courage and judgment that cannot be taught in a classroom." Major Crawford stepped forward. "General, if I may add something. When Captain Mitchell realized we had lost both hydraulic systems, she asked me if we could still complete the mission effectively. When I told her it would be extremely difficult, but possible, she didn't hesitate. She said we were staying to finish the job." General Hawkins nodded thoughtfully. "That's exactly the kind of decision-making I look for in combat pilots. The willingness to push beyond comfort zones when the mission demands it, while maintaining enough judgment to avoid unnecessary risks." Sarah felt a mixture of relief and vindication washing over her, but she remained cautious. She had learned not to trust apparent praise until it was backed up by concrete actions. "Captain," the general continued, "I owe you an apology. This morning, I made assumptions about your capabilities based on factors that have nothing to do with piloting skills. I questioned your readiness for combat operations without giving you the opportunity to prove yourself. The words hung in the air like a formal declaration. Sarah could hardly believe what she was hearing, but the general's tone and expression suggested complete sincerity. "Sir, I appreciate that acknowledgement," Sarah replied carefully. "I understand that combat readiness is a legitimate concern for any commanding officer." "Combat readiness is indeed a critical concern," General Hawkins agreed. "But it should be evaluated based on demonstrated performance, not preconceived notions. What I witnessed today was a pilot who could maintain operational effectiveness under the most challenging circumstances." He turned to address the entire group. "Gentlemen, what Captain Mitchell demonstrated today represents the standard I expect from all our combat pilots: the ability to adapt to changing situations, maintain accuracy under pressure, and make difficult decisions when lives are on the line." Colonel Reed smiled broadly. "General, Captain Mitchell has been trying to tell people exactly that for the past 2 years. Perhaps now more people will listen." General Hawkins looked slightly uncomfortable, clearly aware that his initial skepticism had been both public and unfounded. "Colonel, I think there are several people, myself included, who owe Captain Mitchell more than just an apology." He faced Sarah again, his expression now showing genuine respect. "Captain, I came here prepared to recommend significant changes to this program based on concerns about pilot readiness. Your performance today has forced me to completely reevaluate those recommendations." Sarah felt her heart racing. The implications of the general's words were enormous, not just for her own career, but for other women who might want to fly combat aircraft in the future. "Furthermore," the general continued, "I think it's time for the military to recognize that pilot capability is determined by skill, training, and dedication, not by gender or any other irrelevant factors. You've proven that today beyond any doubt." Major Harrison looked up from his tablet. "General, the evaluation data supports every point you're making. Captain Mitchell's performance metrics exceed the standards for combat-ready pilots in every category we measured." General Hawkins nodded. "Then that settles it. Captain Mitchell, not only will I be recommending that you continue in your current role, but I'll also be recommending you for advanced combat training and potentially instructor duties." Sarah's eyes widened. Instructor duties would mean training other pilots, passing on her knowledge and skills to the next generation of Apache crews. It would also mean formal recognition of her expertise at the highest levels. "Sir, that's an incredible opportunity," she said, struggling to find the right words. "It's not just an opportunity, Captain. It's recognition of proven ability. Today, you demonstrated that you possess the skills, judgment, and courage required not just to fly the Apache, but to excel in it." The general walked closer to Sarah, extending his hand. "Captain Mitchell, I hope you'll accept my apology for the way I approached this evaluation. I let experience turn into prejudice, and that's unacceptable for an officer of my rank and responsibility." Sarah shook his hand, feeling the firmness of his grip and seeing genuine respect in his eyes. "Sir, I appreciate your willingness to reconsider your initial assessment. That takes courage as well." "Perhaps," the general replied, "but not as much courage as it took to continue that mission when your aircraft systems were failing. That was exceptional piloting, Captain." Colonel Reed approached the group, clearly pleased with how the day had developed. "General, I hope this means you'll be giving the Apache program a strong endorsement in your report?" "Colonel, I'll be giving the Apache program the strongest possible endorsement, with particular emphasis on the quality of pilots like Captain Mitchell. This program represents the future of military aviation, and pilots like the captain represent the quality of personnel we need to succeed." General Hawkins turned back to Sarah one final time. "Captain, I have one more question for you, if you don't mind." "Of course, sir." When you realized that I was trying to set you up to fail with those modified scenarios and mechanical challenges, why didn't you call me out on it? Why didn't you request a standard demonstration instead? Sarah considered the question carefully before responding. Sir, I figured that if someone was going to judge my capabilities based on assumptions rather than evidence, the only way to change their mind was through performance. Arguing about the fairness of the test would have been pointless. Succeeding at the test was the only argument that mattered. The general smiled. And this time it was a genuine expression of appreciation rather than condescension. That attitude right there, Captain, is exactly why you're going to be an outstanding combat pilot and instructor. You focused on what you could control, your own performance, rather than complaining about what you couldn't control. Major Crawford laughed. General, that's Sarah in a nutshell. She's always believed that the best response to skepticism is excellence. Well, General Hawkins said, looking around the group, today she provided excellence in abundance. Captain Mitchell, it's been an honor to watch you fly. I only wish I had approached this evaluation with the open mind it deserved from the beginning. As the group began to disperse, General Hawkins pulled Colonel Reed aside for a private conversation. Sarah couldn't hear what they were discussing, but she could see that it was serious and positive. Major Crawford walked with Sarah toward the hangar. You know what this means, don't you? He asked. That I get to keep flying Apaches? Sarah replied. It means a lot more than that. The general's report will go all the way up the chain of command. His endorsement will open doors that have been closed to female pilots for decades. You didn't just prove yourself today, you proved what's possible. Sarah nodded, beginning to understand the broader implications of the day's events. Danny, when I was growing up, I never thought I'd have the chance to fly attack helicopters. When I finally got the opportunity, I promised myself I'd prove that women belonged in these cockpits. Well, consider that promise kept, Crawford replied. And then some. As they reached the hangar, Sarah looked back at the Apache sitting on the flight line. The aircraft that had been her partner in proving herself worthy, that had responded to her touch even when its systems were failing, that had allowed her to demonstrate capabilities that some people had never believed she possessed. General Hawkins approached them one more time, his expression thoughtful. Captain Mitchell, I want you to know that your performance today will influence policy decisions far beyond this base. There are programs and opportunities that have been limited based on the same kinds of assumptions I brought here today. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I've learned something important from this experience. Combat readiness isn't about meeting some preconceived notion of what a warrior should look like. It's about skills, dedication, and the ability to perform under pressure. You've proven that those qualities exist regardless of gender. Sarah felt the weight of representation lifting from her shoulders, replaced by a sense of accomplishment and vindication. Sir, I hope that other qualified pilots, regardless of their background, will be given the same opportunity to prove themselves through performance rather than assumptions. Captain, I can promise you that will be one of the key recommendations in my report. The military needs the best pilots available, and today you've shown me that best has nothing to do with anything except ability. General Hawkins extended his hand one more time. It's been a privilege, Captain. Keep flying the way you flew today, and there's no limit to what you can achieve. As Sarah shook his hand again, she realized that this day represented more than just a successful flight demonstration. It was proof that skills and determination could overcome prejudice, that excellence could change minds, and that sometimes the best response to doubt was simply to soar above it. The general who had arrived that morning, convinced that women couldn't handle the pressures of combat aviation, was leaving with a completely different understanding. His joke about her flying the Apache had turned into genuine respect for her abilities, and his initial certainty about her limitations had been replaced by recognition of her exceptional skills. Standing on the tarmac as the sun began to set, Sarah smiled. Tomorrow, she would be back in the cockpit, continuing to prove that the sky belonged to anyone skilled enough and determined enough to claim it. But today, she had done something more important than just fly well. She had changed a mind, opened a door, and paved the way for others to follow. The Apache behind her was just a machine, but in the right hands, it had become something more, a symbol of possibility, a tool for breaking barriers, and proof that excellence knows no boundaries.